Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us at today's Policy Board meeting. It's really lovely to see you and see some people in the gallery. Before the meeting starts, I have a few announcements to make. So in terms of emergency evacuation procedures, in the case of a fire, a bell will ring continuously. If this occurs, please leave the building immediately, following the green fire exit signs out to the assembly point, which is by the War Memorial on Duke Street. If anyone requires assistance, please do let me know. Lifts should not be used. Please remain at the assembly point and do not attempt to return into the building until you have been advised that it is safe to do so. In terms of facilities, the toilets are situated on the landing at the top of the main staircase and on the ground floor in the customer service centre. Regarding filming this meeting, anyone attending this meeting is entitled to film it, but I should point out that only the councillors, officers, and anyone sitting around these tables may be filmed. Members of the public should not be filmed, so please ensure that cameras are only pointed in this direction. This meeting is also being broadcast via YouTube and recorded. When you're speaking, please may I remind the committee to ensure that you turn on your microphone closely in. Please do let me know if I'm not speaking close enough into it. There we go. A red light will appear on the middle button to indicate that your microphone is switched on. When finished speaking, please remember to turn your microphone off again. So we'll start with apologies for absence. Please, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. I've just had apologies from Councillor Paul Clark. Thank you.
And are there any declarations of interest that anyone from the board would like to make at this point? No? Regarding the minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of November 2023, can board members please agree the minutes of the last meeting, or is there anything that you would like to challenge? Agreed? Lovely, thank you. And now public question time. So we have received 6 questions or statements in from members of the public, and these had to be submitted by 7 p.m. on Wednesday. I will invite you to ask your questions in the order that they were submitted. I also understand that some ward councillors who are not members of the board wish to speak, and they will have the opportunity to do so after the members of the public. These questions will be answered during the presentation for officers, from officers for item 5. So could Mr. Parker please come and read the first question? Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Chatham Green has been rejected for development due to its relative isolation from existing services and facilities, which would lead to a high reliance on the use of private car. This is clear contradiction to this evidence-based document produced by Essex Highways, the Sustainable Accessibility Mapping Appraisal, which scores Chatham Green at 1.79 for sustainability, higher than Great Leys at 1.57 and higher than Bickenacre at 1.64, where a lot of new housing has been allocated. Why has the council ignored this document? My site, Pondside Nursery and Yard, that I've promoted in this local plan and the last 2 previous plans, has yet again been rejected for any allocation, or more importantly, to be included as part of the defined settlement boundary for Chatham Green. My site is not isolated from services and facilities. It's also an industrial brownfields area situated next to the bus stops and therefore more sustainable than the current defined settlement boundary that is set back from the A131 and further away from the bus stops. This boundary could easily be extended by including Bailey's Cottage, the Windmill Pub and 2 more dwellings next to the village green, which would then include my industrial site, which would continue the main built-up extent of the settlement. The advantage of this is that it would bring the current boundary closer to the bus stops. My site has not been mentioned in any of the latest documents, and I feel clearly that it hasn't been fully assessed by the council and overlooked and has overlooked a sustainable brownfield site that scores a very high 113 points on the Sheila. Indeed, a councillor on this committee recognises my site at Chatham Green as sustainable in discussions I've had with him. And also Mr. Potter said to me that he believes a place is sustainable if you can conduct your day-to-day needs without using a car. This certainly is the case with this excellent bus service next to my site. Can I ask the council to reassess my site before this document goes forward to the next consultation stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. As I mentioned a little bit earlier on, the questions will be answered during the presentation from officers for item 5. Could I please have Mrs. Hessing? Thank you.
Good evening. There is no indication that the report has addressed the fact that an application has been submitted for designation of this whole facility as an area of outstanding natural beauty, now known as a national landscape. Although the designation has not yet been granted, there are formal letters of support from the National Trust, the Essex Wildlife Trust, Essex Backed Group and the Essex Waterways. Has it, and if so, doesn't the Policy Board need to know of its findings? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hessing. Could I please have the question or statement from Mr. Irvine?
Good evening, Chairman and Councillors. My name is Peter Irvine, Councillor Irvine, and I'm Chair of Little Baddow Parish Council. In sustainable terms, why has Hammond's Farm development been proposed as an option in preference to areas where there is existing infrastructure for the development, i.e. North East Chelmsford? The option is shifting growth beyond the A12 into rural settlements such as Little Baddow and Sandon, where there are no existing facilities. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Could I please have the question from Mrs. Reid?
Madam Chairman and Council members, I'm Linda Reid. I'm the Chairman of Boreham Parish Council. The proposed Hammond's Farm site is partially in the floodplain of the Chelmsford River, with very limited routes in and out, one being Hammond's Road to the roundabout at the A414 and junction 18 of the A12. The other is via a single-track bridge to Church Road, Boreham, which has protected lane status. Church Road is regularly closed during the wetter months and is due to flooding, and is single lane in parts as it approaches Main Road. Plantation Road, Boreham, is often congested, and traffic volumes on both roads are already predicted to increase substantially. Is the Policy Board aware of the considerable negative impact a development at Hammond's Farm will have in Boreham, and the likely impact of flooding on the development itself? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And could I have Mr. Scott next, please?
Madam Chairman and Committee, good evening. With reference to Hammond's Farm again, given that Chelmsford has delivered property development ahead of the original schedule, signalled by the reduction in the current local plan from 8,000 to 5,000 houses, can the Policy Board be sure that this additional capacity that's being discussed now is required? Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, could I have Mrs. Gallia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is in relation to Hammond's Farm. Is it not strategically risky to concentrate 70 to 80% of the required additional development in a single area where infrastructure is currently wholly inadequate and where only a single land promoter is involved? The council being so reliant on a single entity will give them no leverage whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand that we also have councillors who are not board members that would like to speak today. Could I ask Councillor Armstrong to come forward? Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Anecdotally, I received another letter of support of the National Landscape designation from Sir David Attenborough. In his letter to me, he ended saying that I hope it does succeed. Apologies for the shameless name drop. However, it is nice to remind ourselves and our residents to be proud of the wonderful landscape we are all custodians of. Thank you to all the officers for the hard work they have put into this so far. My first question is regarding the agricultural land assessment on page 31 of Appendix 2. We provide a plan of agricultural land classification. Although this is a typical metric for measuring agricultural potential of land, please could we add a paragraph detailing the exceptional circumstances surrounding the land potential in the east and to the south of Chelmsford. This is because of 4 additional agricultural land uses that are unique to this area that rely on soils different to typical industrialised agriculture. The first is cricket willow farms that line the Chelmer. The second is the acid grassland grazing pioneered by Essex Wildlife Trust, which doubles to have ecological benefits. The third is the emergence of arguably the finest vineyards in the country. This has increased the agricultural land value from lower than that of the Grade 2 land to almost twice the value. It is also a strategic economic value to Chelmsford, as where other agricultural products are sent away for processing, the grapes grown in our city and neighbouring boroughs are made into wine in Chelmsford. Finally is the internationally famous turkeys produced in Chelmsford. To note, the main farmer of the turkeys in the area is pioneering the use of turkeys to pick fallen grapes in the vineyards and graze under the local solar farms. My second question is, there appears to be little analysis of how developing to the east of the A12, which currently acts as a bypass, will have on the wider area. Typically in town planning, you should never build outside the ring road or bypass, otherwise it becomes ineffective. That is one of the reasons why London has a green belt and the M6 toll was constructed. Can we work with wider stakeholders to assess what long-term solutions our residents can expect should this plan be adopted and the A12 junctions between 17 and 19 become an inner city road, so that these can be communicated to the residents within the plan to help them effectively provide their views and comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is this something that you will be able to address within your presentation?
Yes, Chair, we will.
Lovely. Thank you very much for the questions. And could I please, I believe we have a question from Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. My question is also regarding Hammond's Farm. Why is Hammond's Farm included within the preferred options, given the excess flooding within this area and extensive lack of infrastructure? How are these problems to be overcome without extensive enhancement within the area to the A414 and the A12, though the A12 is currently undergoing improvement, with the quantity of traffic from the monumental amount of properties that would be built, the A12 would require immense changes to cope with such a number of vehicles. Given the clear challenges of this proposal, how has this option been put forward without, Chair, as far as we are aware, any modelling of the adverse traffic impact having been provided by either Essex Highways or National Highways? Thank you.
I believe this will be addressed in the presentation as well, won't it? Okay. Thank you very much for your questions. Are there any other questions that not from the board, from non-board councillors? The report was... Nope. Okay. I think we just go to Jeremy now.
If we're able just to get the presentation on the screen, that would be great. Thank you. So thank you very much, and good evening, board and members of the public. I'm Jeremy Potter. I'm the Spatial Planning Services Manager at the City Council, and myself and Claire Stuckey to my right-hand side, Principal Planning Officer at the City Council, will be providing a presentation to you to set out where and how we've got to the position we have in relation to the review of Chelmsford's local plan. So I suppose, first of all, I just wanted to move on to the next slide, which I'm not being able to do.
Is the green light on?
There are none.
Is it that? It should just be.
Okay, so oh.
It's working.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, so first of all, I just wanted to reiterate what the actual purpose of this item is and the purpose of this report. And the purpose of it is for boards to consider the documents actually to be published for public consultation. So I think it's quite important to ensure that the board are aware that this isn't the final version of the plan. The final version of the plan, as we can show in a slide coming up, actually will be when we submit the document to government. So I think that's just a really important thing to do, to say is that actually what we're seeking is more information and more responses in terms of consultation responses to the position that we have got to, which is the preferred options stage. So moving on to why we need to review the plan, it's really important that we keep our local plan, our development plans up to date, and they need to be reviewed every 5 years. Once they become more than 5 years old, they become effectively, or parts of the plan can be effectively called out of date. So it's really important that we maintain that position to ensure that the City Council, as local planning authority, maintains control over where new development is placed within the city's area. And it's also important to ensure that we're meeting new ambitions and aspirations. And some of the new things that came through from the issues and options consultation is there's a real climate change and ecological issues in relation to making sure that new planning policy and new development address those issues. There's a housing crisis, as we no doubt all are aware of, and also there's a need to ensure that we create high-value new jobs. And one of the things that I think we just need to be bearing in mind is the fact that actually this plan is very much bringing new employment into Chelmsford, as well as new housing. New housing will always get the headlines, but it's actually employment is a really important part to ensure that it's a sustainable place to live, and we offer our residents, high-value jobs. So the other reason that we're reviewing the plan is that we made a commitment to do so in the last plan, which is the right thing to do, to actually say what we're going to do and do it when we say we're going to do it. And also we need to ensure that all our plans and policies remain consistent with national planning policy and also, changing legislation, which is always changing, I'm afraid. So we always need to make sure that we're keeping up to date. We're extending the plan period by 5 years to provide for new development to 2041, extending it from 2036. And we're also looking to see how we can monitor our policies more effectively through the existing monitoring framework. So where we are, and as I think this diagram is probably quite good visually to sort of illustrate the point that I was saying right at the beginning. We're at the second stage of getting involved. So there's still quite a few stages to go, as you can see, through that process. We always do a preferred option stage because we think that that's the right thing to do, rather than going straight to a draft plan. We think that there's a need to ensure that we hear from stakeholders and residents on the more of the detail, rather than the kind of more abstract issues and options stage, asking people what they think in the abstract. So as you can see, we're in the middle of those 3 stages of consultation. So just moving on to the points about housing need, and I think this probably addresses some of the one of the questions, question 5 from Mr. Scott. And what you can see on this table is that the shortfall, and Mr. Scott's right, the shortfall has been reducing in relation to what the new local plan needs to provide. But I think what we need to always set that in context is the fact that we always add a buffer on to the supply of allocated new housing sites in the local plan. And that's been done on numerous previous local plans and has proved to be really important to ensure that we actually deliver what we say we need. Because not every site comes forward which I'll show you on the next slide, because the evidence actually shows that where you have a situation where you don't meet the buffer, then you will potentially fail to meet your overall housing requirements. So this bar chart here just shows you the difference between when we were on consultation in 2022 on the issues and options consultation, and you can see that the green has moved higher. So there are more commitments in the pipeline. But what's the most important thing is probably that blue line. We've only actually achieved in that period very few, actually less than 1,000 actual completions. And they're the things that matter. It's the completions that matter. What's in the pipeline is obviously very important, but what we need to ensure is that we have a sufficient buffer to ensure that we actually do meet our housing requirement. And the next slide, if I can, there we go. Probably go on 2 now, but there we are. So the next slide actually shows that more graphically. So in previous plan periods, we've actually added buffers onto our housing number. So from 2001 to 2013, we actually added a 16% buffer. But as you can see on that graph, we failed to meet our overall target, and there were nearly 2,000 homes not delivered in that period. From 2013 to 2023, the current plan period, there is a slight increase of 653 homes over our target with an 18% buffer. But I think what's probably most interesting is that over a whole plan period since 2001, we have actually slightly undersupplied, even when you add the supply buffer in. So even when you add more homes than actually your straight housing requirement shows, you still, the evidence shows that it's still difficult to actually achieve that requirement, and hence why we add the buffer on to our housing numbers. So moving on, he says, in terms of other development needs, we do have a requirement to ensure that we make provision for travellers, and that's gypsy and travellers and travelling show people. That need, in particular for gypsies and travellers, has increased quite significantly. And we are waiting the final results. But as you can see, it looks like we need between 36 and 77 new pitches. And bearing in mind that the sites for these, we try to ensure that they're around about 10 pitches per site. So you can see that there is a need for gypsy and traveller pitches to be provided. Travelling show people plots. At the moment, there is just one more required that's in the adopted plan. But again, we are waiting for the final result of the gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment to ensure that we're planning for the right amount. So that will need to follow through in the next stage of the plan. In terms of employment need, we've got some detailed employment evidence base that supports our plan, and effectively that provides three scenarios, which the first one is more about being driven by employment sector growth. The second one is more in relation to the employment growth that's required as part of projected employment. And the third one is where you try and relate new jobs to new houses. So one is about sectorial growth, two about what you've done in the past and project that forward, and the third one is trying to match jobs and houses. And what we've tried to do is actually the third stage, because we think to be sustainable you really do need to match jobs with houses, and that's why we've gone with the higher figure in relation to our employment needs.
I'm afraid I'm not sure how we'd get those ones back running. Are these two enough for most people in the gallery? No. Give me a minute.
Sorry, Councillor Sherlock. Do you mind waiting until the end?
I was just making use of this dead
I know,
space.
I know.
Okay, sorry.
I do appreciate though.
Please.
Oh, fantastic. Some excitement for the meeting. Very grateful that you're here. Are those TVs on now? Amazing. But you can still stay down here with us, so thank you. Jeremy, would you like to continue?
Thank you very much. And apologies for that, and thank you. Just as easy as just turning them on, wasn't it? It looked like, yeah. Okay, so moving forwards in terms of the plan's updated strategic priorities, and what you'll see within the plan is that they're grouped into 3 main categories. So priorities for climate, priorities for growth, and priorities for place. And within those 3 areas, there are specific strategic priorities which go through the whole of the plan. And just picking, a couple of those, addressing the climate and ecological emergency is, of course, exceptionally important. And meeting the needs for new homes, that's another really important thing that we need to do. But they all are. They're not designed to be in order of preference. They are all interrelated priorities that work and flow throughout the whole document. And then that then also moves on to the vision. And the vision for the plan is much, much shorter than in the adopted plan, which ran on for a couple of pages. This is, really distilling the issues into far fewer words. And that has continued from the issues and options stage. That's pretty much unchanged from that stage. So I'm going to hand over to Claire Stuckey, who will go through some of the detail of the plan and the proposals within the document. So I'll just hand over to Claire.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. So the preferred options document proposes a range of planning policies that would be used to steer development across the plan area over the plan period. So there's 4 new strategic and 1 new non-strategic or development management policy proposed, alongside updates to existing policies. And these are designed to strengthen the plan and respond to new local and national issues and priorities. So the 4 new strategic policies on the screen would really help the plan to go much further than it does currently to ensure future development would support improvements in health and well-being of communities and residents, create successful places where people want to live and to work and visit, really maximise opportunities for active and sustainable transport, and strengthen and support improvements to the regeneration of Chelmsford City Centre. And then new DM Policy 31 represents a real step change towards lowering carbon emissions by requiring all new buildings to be built to net zero carbon in operation. So essentially that means designed to be ultra low energy, fossil fuel free, and to generate renewable energy on site. The updated strategic policy S7 contains a preferred spatial strategy in the plan, and this is important. It sets out how much development's needed, where growth could be located, and what areas would be protected. And the main components of the spatial strategy are illustrated on the key diagram within the plan. And this shows that new housing and employment would continue to be based around 3 growth areas: central and urban Chelmsford, North Chelmsford, and South and East Chelmsford. And this new development would consist of site allocations carried forward from the existing adopted plan, together with a series of new proposed sites, which are focused in Chelmsford City Centre, location 1, East Chelmsford, location 16A and 16B, and then sustainable villages, locations 11, 14 and 17. And I'll discuss these in more detail in a few moments. But they're all represented, the sites, by the coloured circles that you can see on the screen. The key diagram also shows that there aren't any changes proposed to the existing green belt boundaries or the green wedge, which follows the river valleys in Chelmsford. So Growth Area 1, Central and Urban Chelmsford, 6 new housing sites are proposed in the draft consultation document. These could deliver around 750 new homes on brownfield or previously developed sites. They're all in the city centre, so in a highly sustainable location with good access to transport, education and recreation and so on. And the plan on the screen shows the location of the 6 new sites and also the location of the existing sites rolled forward from the adopted plan. So it includes, if I start at the top of the screen and work my way around clockwise, we've got Marriages Mill, which is 1Y, Granary Car Park on Victoria Road, which is site 1Z, Meadows Shopping Centre, in the south, which is site 1W. Then we have Coval Lane Car Park, site 1AA to the west, Glebe Road Car Park, site reference 1BB. And then finally, former K. Metzler premises on New Street, which is site 1X. And overall, the proposed new sites, together with allocations in the adopted plan, including West and East Chelmsford, would mean that this growth area could deliver over 4,000 new homes and around 9,000 square metres of new employment floor space over the plan period to 2041. Moving on to growth area 2, this will see a considerable amount of new development over the plan period, almost 8,000 new homes and 66,000 square metres of new employment land. Now, most of this will come forward on existing allocated sites in North East Chelmsford, the Chelmsford Garden Community, which is identified for over 6,000 new homes. And then there are also sites at north of Broomfield and Great Leys, which will deliver homes. The proposed new housing sites are 2 small sites for around 20 dwellings each at Ford End. And we feel these could help to improve and sustain existing village services, such as a primary school, and they'll also help contribute towards the 10% small sites target that's set out in national planning policy. New employment development is also proposed through extensions of existing employment areas to the north of Boreham Village and to the north of Roxwell. An expansion of these well-established employment sites could provide rural inward investment opportunities and also help to reflect aspirations of national policy to support the sustainable growth and expansion of businesses in rural areas. And then, in addition, a new Gypsy and Traveller site is also proposed to be delivered in North East Chelmsford at the Garden Community to help meet the provisional needs to 2041, as Jeremy has outlined. So the 2 plans on the screen there now show the location of the existing employment areas that are proposed for expansion. So Waltham Road lies to the north of Boreham Village and the A12. So the land to the south is already allocated, and then we're looking to expand that to the north. And then Little Boyton Hall, that's to the north of Boyton Cross and Roxwell with access off the 1060. And again, the existing site lies to the south, and we're looking to expand it further to the north. Then here we show on the screen the indicative location for the 2 small housing sites in the village of Ford End. These are located to the west and to the south. They're shown at this stage as a symbol on the draft mapping, as we need to take further work to determine appropriate site boundaries, and they will appear in the next iteration of the plan. And that further work will include assessing the consultation responses that we receive to the preferred options plan. But in line with national policy, these won't be any larger than 1 hectare in size, and they'll also be adjacent to the village boundary. So the third growth area, South and East Chelmsford, this is proposed for significant new growth of around 4,000 homes and 87,000 square metres of new employment space over the plan period and beyond. Some of this will be on existing allocations carried forward, notably land north of Southwood and Ferrers, and there'll also be 100 homes allocated through the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan. But most of the proposed growth will be on 2 new large proposed site allocations. The first is 3,000 new homes and over 40,000 square metres of new employment land and new gypsy and traveller provision on East Chelmsford Garden Community, otherwise known as Hammonds Farm. And with the proposed site here also identified as considered capable of a further 1,500 homes beyond the plan period after 2041. And I will come back to describing this site in more detail in a moment. The second large allocation is a new standalone strategic employment site for around 43,000 square metres of new employment adjacent to the A12 at Junction 18. And this could make a really important contribution to the delivery of employment and jobs in Chelmsford by providing a mix of new office, industrial and distribution space in a sustainable location close to the strategic road network, Sandon Park and Ride, and with proposed links to the new station. In addition, some housing developments also proposed on sites in Bitnaker and East Hanningfield. These villages have primary schools, employment sites, community facilities, which makes them suitable for more limited scale development. So returning to Hammonds Farm, so this is the largest single proposed new site allocation, and its reference is 16A within the consultation document. And you can see from the plan here that it's situated between junctions 18 and 19 on the A12 to the east of the Park and Ride. The area proposed for built development, so homes, employment, schools, etc., is shown in the light brown notation. And this is positioned between a large 174 hectare country park, which is shown in bright green either side of the A12, and also positioned adjacent to an area of protection to the east of Sandon Brook, which is shown for future recreation, biodiversity and sustainable drainage systems. And that's in the darker green colour to the east. So the location and proximity of the site to Chelmsford urban area would allow opportunities for sustainable and active travel to be provided through the Green Wedge and over and under the A12 to key destinations such as the city centre and the new Bewley train station. Primary highway access would be from the A414 to the south and directly from junction 19 from the A12 to the north. And capacity improvements for this road, the A414, and the junctions on the A12 would be required as set out in the draft site policy within the consultation document. A wide range of new community services and facilities are proposed on the site, all within the brown colour notation that you can see, so schools, childcare, nurseries, open spaces, recreation, community facilities, neighbourhood centres, etc. And the large new country park would help to significantly improve public access and recreation opportunities along Chelmer Valley River Corridor. It'll also provide connections to the new facilities in the country park and the active travel routes, which are proposed as part of the existing development allocations to the east of Chelmsford, which are locations 3A to D on the plan on the screen. The draft site allocation policy also requires 20% biodiversity net gain over the site and the development of significant new employment floor space to provide local jobs and further support Chelmsford's economic growth. Now, the Council's evidence base does highlight that the site has a relatively high landscape sensitivity rating. It doesn't have a formal landscape designation apart from the conservation area along the river corridor proposed to form the new country park. And on the eastern portion of the site, the A12 and the National Grid power lines have a significant impact on the existing landscape. The allocation of the country park along the river valley and protection of land to the east of Sandon Brook, alongside policy requirements to reinstate historic landscape features, would help to mitigate the impact of the development. Now, we've heard a number of questions, Madam Chair, from members of the public, and I'll try and address those now because they relate to the Hammonds Farm site. So the question number 2 was from Mrs. Hessing, and that was asking about the application to Natural England to be considered as an area of outstanding natural beauty. We have been made aware of the approach by the working group to Natural England for designation of an area which includes the site and Little Baddow and Danbury as a national landscape. Natural England have confirmed that there is no formal application process for these types of submission. They've also not specifically requested the submission, and they are fully committed to progressing 4 current designation projects that they announced in June 2021 and a potential new national park, and are currently therefore not taking any more projects. Landscape designation is a multi-year process which we understand on average can take between 2 to 5 years for a designation to come forward. And Natural England are not in a position to confirm timescales for the next series of landscape programme studies. Notwithstanding this timescale issue, we are not aware that Natural England have provided any feedback on the merit of the proposal. And as I've just discussed, the Council has undertaken its own landscape alongside heritage assessments to inform the draft plan. And the fact that a self-selective submission has been made for potential future designation doesn't mean that it will ever be successful, and therefore we feel cannot prejudice the proposed inclusion of the site within the review of the local plan. That said, we would encourage the working group to submit the report that they've sent to Natural England as part of any formal representations they wish to make to the preferred options, and that will help to ensure that we can fully consider the detailed issues raised. And finally, in response to Mrs. Hessing's question, Natural England are themselves a statutory consultee for local plans and will be consulted directly on the preferred options consultation once it starts. Question 3 now from Mr. Irvine. He asked why Hammonds Farm had been selected over other options, i.e. North East Chelmsford. So as I've just said, Hammonds Farm, we feel, represents an opportunity to deliver a new sustainable garden community, developed through a comprehensive master plan with all services and facilities provided to promote and enable sustainable living, from schools to employment, open spaces to sports provision. The preferred options consultation document also includes full details of alternative spatial strategies that we've considered, and these appear under Spatial Strategic Policy S7 in the plan from page 83 onwards. And this explains that further expansion of North East Chelmsford, or the garden community, has been discounted as the promoted development sites are not deliverable within the plan period to 2041. And this is given permitted mineral extraction and land remediation works that need to take place. Question 4 from Mrs. Reid raises the questions about the impact of the proposed Hammonds Farm development on Boreham Village and also flooding. And some of these issues were also mentioned by Councillor Scott. So the site does include an area of flood risk and it is expected that a significant portion of this area would actually form open space and country park, with the precise boundaries to be decided as part of the master planning process to follow. Now, the draft site policy in the plan does require sustainable urban drainage, or SUDs as they're often called, and flood risk management to be put in place to ensure that the site would be suitably safe from flood risk, on the site and impacts elsewhere. Regards traffic and highways impact, the test we have to consider on this issue is if the overall strategy for development proposed has a severe impact on the network. The preferred options highways modelling work notes that there are existing highways capacity issues on the A12 between junctions 17 and 19 before any further development. So development at Hammonds Farm could have the potential to add to this and cause some rerouting onto local roads in the area if the development were just to be built on site with no mitigation being put in place. However, the modelling goes on to conclude that with necessary site policy requirements as proposed at Hammonds Farm in the site policy, which seek to maximise internalisation of trips and active and sustainable travel schemes, the allocation of the development is not considered as having a severe impact on the strategic highway network. Then, in addition, specifically, this was a comment raised by Councillor Scott, discussions with National Highways will continue to best ensure that future development growth in Chelmsford can be supported by the strategic highway network over the longer term.
Sorry, could I please just make a point that we've had the opportunity for questions from the gallery, we've had the opportunity for questions from non-board members. If we could let officers finish their presentation, then we'll be able to move to questions from the board. Thank you.
I'll carry on if that's okay, because I'm not in a position to move on to the next. Oh, there we go. Great. So question 6 was from Mrs. Galia. I hope I've said that correctly. And she asks if it's risky to focus so much development on a single site with one land promoter and where infrastructure is currently inadequate. And the infrastructure point was also mentioned by Councillor Scott. So the proposals at Hammonds Farm equate to 13% of the housing development within the plan period to 2041. So 3,000 houses out of the 22,500 that are proposed. And this isn't considered an overly large proportion. The additional development would also be spread across the whole plan period, and if allocated, the Hammonds Farm proposals would anticipate to start delivering homes from around 2029. Similar to the allocation in North East Chelmsford, the quantum of the proposed development at Hammonds Farm would allow for significant infrastructure provision to be provided to serve the development. New bridges, road improvements, schools, the country park, bus connections, active travel routes, some of which I've mentioned already. And the Hammonds Farm site is also considered well located to the existing strategic highway network and Sandon Park and Ride, and would provide connections also to the new rail station at Bewley Park. On the third point about having a single promoter or landowner of a strategic site, this is actually considered an advantage, as this can facilitate a comprehensive approach to the planning and delivery of proposals rather than being split across different commercial interests, which can create a fragmented approach. Before I move on to the next slide, I just want to point out at the bottom of the screen there on the plan is the proposed location for the standalone employment site, 16B, which is south of the A414 and the proposed Hammonds Farm site, just so you know where that is in connection with East Chelmsford. Thanks. I'll change direction. Thank you, Dan. Okay, so going back to the small sites in Growth Area 3, so this shows the indicative location of the small housing sites that are proposed on the edge of Bicknaker and East Hanningfield this time, and again the actual boundaries could be confirmed ahead of the next version of the plan being published. In terms of the consultation document itself, attached to Appendix 2 of your covering report, this represents a complete draft plan with a comprehensive set of draft policies, draft site allocations, information on reasonable alternatives that we've looked at, a draft monitoring schedule and draft mapping. And as we're undertaking a review of the adopted plan, it is presented as an edited and updated version of the existing adopted document. And a track change version has also been produced, so it's clear what parts are proposed for change, and we'll also publish that as a supporting document for the consultation period. The preferred options document is informed by a wide range of evidence-based documents, one of which includes an integrated impact assessment, or IIA for short. And this assesses the emerging plan against a range of indicators: social, environmental, economic, equality, and advises on ways in which any adverse effects could be reduced or mitigated, and how any positive effects could be maximised. And in doing so, it helps to ensure that the plan is promoting sustainable development. The key findings of the IIA are summarised in section 4 of your covering report, and I've just highlighted one of those on the screen, in that the document finds the spatial strategy or policy S7 performs better than the 5 alternative approaches that were tested at the issues and options stage, and will focus new growth to sustainable locations. The IIA document will also be published for consultation alongside the preferred options plan. In terms of the consultation, we are proposing to run a comprehensive programme of activities. It will last 6 weeks, and we'll launch it at the beginning of May, and closer to the time we'll publish the exact dates. This, as Jeremy mentioned, will be the second of 3 rounds of public consultation, and aims to gain feedback and comment on the draft plan and the IIA. It's important to note, and I'll also emphasise, that the plan is still evolving and no decisions are fixed at this stage, and we'll continue to gather plan evidence and engage with stakeholders before the plan is finalised for another round of consultation, which we anticipate us running early next year. As set out in the consultation plan attached to Appendix 4 of your covering report, the consultation will go beyond the minimum requirements of legislation, and a range of consultation tools and channels will be used to promote it and engage with as many people and organisations as possible. These are listed on the screen and will include things like direct notifications, adverts in local publications, posters, pop-up displays, exhibitions, and use of social media. Several materials will also be available to support the consultation, including short non-technical summary leaflets of the consultation documents, frequently asked questions, and a consultation information pack will also be prepared for parish and town councils. During the consultation, people will have a variety of ways to make their comments, and it is available now, our software, if people would like to pre-register. So we have their details, and in doing so, they would be automatically notified once the consultation is launched. Before we conclude and move to the report recommendations, Madam Chair, I'll just respond, if I can, to Mr. Parker's question. His was question 1. On the point about sustainable accessibility mapping and the appraisal evidence base that's been produced, this is just one of many pieces of evidence which has to be considered. And following that first appraisal, additional modelling work has been undertaken. This was firstly done on 3 different hybrid spatial approaches, when the report is available on our website, reference T0001. Of the 3 spatial approaches that this work tested, number 3 included testing growth at Chatham Green. And it was shown that this would have the greatest impact on the local and strategic road network, most notably to the north of Chelmsford, resulting in traffic being reassigned to local routes through Broomfield and Melbourne. And this spatial approach with Chatham Green was also shown to have the greatest overall cross-boundary impact, notably on the A131 to and from Braintree district. The report also notes it's not necessarily the case that the findings of traffic impact modelling will align with those from the Sustainable Accessibility Review. So, for instance, development in rural areas may be assessed as having a low traffic impact, but will unlikely be located in areas with good levels of sustainability, accessibility, bus routes, etc., and alternatives to car use. It's therefore recommended that when selecting a spatial strategy, you consider both the extent of future network impact as well as the availability of sustainable infrastructure. The latest traffic modelling for the preferred options plan takes the accessibility mapping appraisal work into account, but overall concludes that the allocation of development in the local plan preferred spatial strategy provides the opportunity to make good use of existing and potential sustainable accessibility to and from the proposed sites. Other points raised by Mr Parker relate to his site at Pondside Nursery and Yard, and he calls for it to be included within the settlement of Chatham Green. So we've also carried out work to review defined settlement boundaries as part of the work to inform the new plan. And the methodology for this and the outputs is set out in a technical note, which is also on our website. This note sets out the criteria for working out, determining what should be included or excluded within a defined settlement boundary, including Chatham Green. Now, as Mr Parker's site is set apart from the defined settlement boundary, it's considered isolated or sporadic development, detached from the main built-up extent of the settlement, and therefore more related to the countryside than the built-up part of the village itself. Therefore, the reason is that we've excluded Mr Parker's site to avoid giving rise to pressure to develop adjoining land, which could harm the character and appearance of the area. And then on his point about proximity to the A131 and bus stops, this isn't a criteria for including a site within a settlement boundary, and when allocating land for development in a plan, accessibility by public transport, including buses, is one consideration that we take into account. Mr Parker's other points question whether his site has been fully assessed by the council. We can confirm that Pondside Nursery and Yard has been fully assessed through the SHELAR, which is published on our website. And development at Chatham Green has also been assessed through the integrated impact assessment as a reasonable alternative and as part of the wider evidence base. And I've already referred to the traffic modelling, and other documents include the water cycle study. And the reasons for rejecting Chatham Green in the spatial strategy are given on page 84 of the preferred options document. And this is because of its relative isolation from existing services and facilities, which would lead to a higher reliance on the use of the private car, landscape capacity and sensitivity concerns, and capacity limits at wastewater recycling facilities serving the area. So I hope that answers Mr Parker's questions as well.
So you'll be probably glad to hear, and thank you for your forbearance, that we have come to the final slide with the recommendations on there that are on the report. I just wanted to pick up two final things because Ms Stuckey has picked up a number of issues that Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Scott spoke about, but just a couple of additional matters that possibly weren't picked up in terms of agricultural land classification. I mean, the site in question, Hammonds Farm site, is proposed to be, half of it is proposed to be left as either country park or green. So there's an opportunity for many of the types of land use that Councillor Armstrong set out within the development itself. As many members may be aware, we seek to protect the most versatile agricultural land, which is grades 1, 2 and 3A. The Hammonds Farm proposal at the moment is classified as 3 and 4. So it's in that kind of moderate agricultural value, whereas the main areas of higher agricultural value in Chelmsford are to the northwest of the city, out towards the Easters and Pleshy, and all of those areas out there are grade 2. And just picking up a little bit further in terms of traffic analysis and modelling, Ms Stuckey did talk about all of the stages that we've gone through, which I won't repeat, but we will be undertaking some further junction modelling for the junctions on the A12 to determine what interventions are required on those junctions to accommodate the new development. And in relation to Councillor Scott's questions and statement, just to reiterate in terms of flooding and just to supplement what Ms Stuckey said, we're not proposing on Hammonds Farm to allocate any of the development within the highest risks of flood. So it will be in flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding, which would be proposed for development. And I think that probably answers all of the questions, I hope. And I will move to the recommendation, Chair, which is on the screen, and hand back over to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the work that's gone into preparing this. I realise it's a significant piece of work, and for the time going through it with us today. Can I ask, Councillor Jupes has given me a little indication. I'd like to open up the floor for questions to board members. Councillor Jupes.
Yeah, I know it's a process that we follow in terms of the issue of documents, but given the size and complexity of the documents that we've received, having a week to digest and look at all the detail has been very difficult, and I don't feel that I have actually grasped everything. I welcome and appreciate the review that's been given, but it is quite a simplistic review of a great deal of detail. And as can be seen tonight, there is a huge amount of public concern about this development and what it will do to impact on the villages that surround that area. So I feel really that I haven't had sufficient time to digest all the detail and actually recommend this goes out to public consultation. I would have welcomed much more time to explore the details so that I could be more informed about the decision I'm making here tonight. So I just make that as a statement of concern. I think it took a month longer than we would normally have expected for the document to land, and then we're expected within 1 week to read and be able to be prepared for this meeting, which I think was not reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Jupes, for that. I've spoken with officers around this. The report was sent to members and published on the website 5 clear working days ahead of the meeting. This is the same as for other policy board meetings and other city council meetings, and it also complies with the legal notice period for agendas and reports. So that's the response back to that question. Councillor Massey and then Councillor Sherlock, I know you had an earlier question. We'll go to you next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 observations. Firstly, I'm disappointed to see that growth sites 1G, Chelmsford Social Club, and 1P, British Legion, represent a significant loss of community space within the city centre. Secondly, as has been raised before, the various city centre development proposals will severely reduce the number of car parking spaces in the city centre. I believe 7 of the central development proposals are in car parks. While I applaud any aspirations to encourage cycling and modal shift, for most of the residents of Southwood and Ferrers, these are far from ideal. Cycling is not an option. E-scooters thankfully don't operate out that far, and public transport will take around 50 minutes each way by bus and 55 minutes by train. I've never subscribed to the 15-minute city conspiracy, but a lack of city centre parking will dissuade residents from the outlying parts of our district to visit the city centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Yep, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you very much. I'd like to share the sentiments. A lot of work has gone into this. I'm not as formal. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm going to tell you what I think, because going back to Councillor Jeeps's things, I'm new to this council. This is my first year. I've not done district council level before. And for me to be engaged in something where I get 1 week's notice to look at 1,500 pages of documents, understanding how you've just responded, that is a disgrace. It is a disgrace to people like me that you're trying to get on this council and trying to get involved, because it's very hard to get involved. What I've seen up here is nothing more than a sales presentation, which is what it is. The detail is in that 1,500 pages. I work full time, so something needs to be done here, and we need to look at getting information out so we can actually do what we're here for, which is not just to ask questions, but is to form opinion as councillors representing our elected public. So, I've spent a bit of time at weekends on the train tonight going through some of these things. First of all, observation, general. For me, this local plan and the changes, this looks like it's written by developers for developers. And how do I base that without just making it as an emotive subject? Well, some of you will know that before I was on this level of council, I've been on South Woodham, and I've been through local planning South Woodham. And we created a neighbourhood plan. Now, we all know that neighbourhood plans cannot supersede the local plan. And when I look what the developers have written in all their recommendations, especially some of the developers from Woodham, if this plan goes ahead, it will force a major rewrite of the South Woodham neighbourhood plan, and it will take out a lot of the clauses that we have in that are protecting our community that neighbourhood plan serves. This is how it works. We know that. Local plans overrule neighbourhood plans. But this whole thing is written by developers. There is so much on the developers, like developer opinion, developer this, and you can see it's not going to be well received in any community that has produced the neighbourhood plan on the current existing plan. Let's come to some of the things that you've been talking up tonight. Roads. How many times do we have to go through this? There are 2 roads off the Dengie. You build Hammond's Farm, they're all coming through Woodham. No other way. Yet we keep going through this process of saying, OK, this is preferred options, now we're going to send it out to consultation, we'll cover that in the next one, we get to the next one, oh, we'll cover that in the master plan, we get to the next one, we'll cover that in the planning application. And it's just this pass on all the time. I say the buck stops, this is not ready yet to go out. How do I come to that conclusion? Well, it's not all emotion. We can go into the small print, if you like. Oh, by the way, rail, by the way. Should we cover rail? Because I've heard that the beloved Bewley Park is the solution to all this. Yet another 3,000 new homes that can get to Bewley Park. Guess what? There is not enough slots going into Liverpool Street. If Bewley Park goes ahead, the people of South Woodham will lose their through services. You've got development in Southend, development in Rochford, development in Basildon, all using that Southend line. There are not enough slots. You've got another 6,000 people trying to go to Bewley Park. That's another 4 trains. You can only get 20 trains down an hour in peak time. So let's not keep saying that the rail is going to cope. Someone is going to have to pay. And guess what? It'll be the through services from the branch line in Southminster branch line, which, by the way, in case some of the people that live in Chelmsford and represent the inner wards of Chelmsford, goes through the district in Southwood and Ferrers and Battlesbridge. Appalling. Where are we with Southwood and Ferrers? I'm going to put my Southwood and Ferrers head on now because that's my councillor. And, you know, there's nothing in there for Southwood, and that's actually a good thing, I think. You say you're not going to do any more for South Woodham. South Woodham's got 1,221 houses under the current plan, same under the existing plan. 1,000 square metres industrial space. Guess what? Hammond's Farm, 3,000 houses, 43,000 square metres of industrial space. Wow. Where's all the employment going to go? Well, guess what? It's driving up through Bicknaker because they're all going to live in Woodham and also try and get employment into these areas. Not been thought about. But the other thing with South Woodham, it's not what you've left out, it's what you've left in. Page 220, subclause 7.404, last sentence, quite clearly says that if the permission is not implemented and a new proposal comes forward, the site capacity will be considered on its individual merit. So everything that we say here, master plan, local plan, when it gets to the planning application, as it quite clearly quotes there, if the developer doesn't like it, oh, well, they can submit something totally different and it can be accepted. This is also backed up by another clause, you know what, I can't even find it, but I read it, saying how Countryside can squeeze their estates, and they proudly put it in that they can squeeze the estates, and they use examples of other areas that they've done it, and they are the major builder in Southwood and Ferrers. So you don't have to say nothing's happening in Southwood and Ferrers because we've had a planning application that's been in for over a year. Guess what? It's been sound for some reason. They could just squeeze it. They could just come back and say, well, we site tested it for 1,500. We're going to put 1,500. It's in that clause and the other clause. So for me, this plan is a bit nonsense. It's not ready to go out to this stage of consultation. We need to tighten these things up, sort out the railways, sort out the roads, and start giving the public things that they can digest. Because, you know, this doesn't work for the people that are affected by it. And based on what I've seen and what I've heard and what I've managed to read in a week, I cannot support this going out tonight. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor O'Brien, I would like to, I can see your passion and I can see the points that you're raising. I did want to address one point myself before handing over to Jeremy, which is that we're not asking the board to sign off on this document. This is a lot of information, and that the recommendation that we're looking for is for this board to agree, for the consultation to go out to get exactly that, the feedback that you're having, to have feedback from the members of the public on this document. I can see you've got your mic lit, but I do want to just give Jeremy...
Ask if I could respond to you on that.
You can, yes. But then we'll give Jeremy the chance to respond to your questions originally.
But this is what I say. You come to us and say, oh, it's only going out. The next time when we come back, oh, it's only this, we'll look at that in the master plan. Then we go through that process. Oh, it's only the master plan, we'll look at that in the planning applications. This is how it starts. This is how it goes on. For me, it stops tonight. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien, so I will give Jeremy the chance to respond to your questions.
Thank you. So, I mean, I suppose, first of all, you know, officers don't share Councillor O'Brien's characteristics of the way the plan has been prepared. It's been prepared by your officers at the City Council. Of course, we need to know where developers are proposing to develop, because the council doesn't develop its own housing. It's developers that develop housing and employment in the main across the country. So, of course, we need to be aware, but I don't share Councillor O'Brien's characteristic of what actually has happened through this process. We've been on consultation once before. The document that's appended Appendix 1 sets out very clearly for the boards to show how we have consulted before, what people have said, and how we've responded to that. So again, I think I just wanted to make that point. And again, I think finally, reiterating what Madam Chairman has just said, we are tonight agreeing to ask people what they think. That is the sole purpose of tonight's decision. We're asking you, the board, to put this out onto consultation to get feedback from the public and from stakeholders. And just finally, I think we just need to remember that we are duty bound to produce a plan to make sure that our development in our patch is done in a plan-led way, which it has been. I'm very proud to say it has been over the last 20 odd years. And also the fact that we need to ensure that our residents get good jobs and good housing. And that is a very important thing for us to consider, in addition to obviously the points that Councillor O'Brien said. So that's just for me. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Soshin, I can see your hand up, but I did want to give Councillor Pooley the opportunity to come in from before. Let's start fresh. Who wants to talk? Put your hand up. Oh, no. Okay, this time, Councillor Soshin, then we'll go Councillor Sherlock and Councillor Pooley.
Just to say, the equivalent point in the existing local plan went out to consultation, and after that there were switches from the west of Chelmsford into the sites around Great Barrow. So it, as has been said, this isn't cut in stone as Councillor O'Brien thinks. At the equivalent stage, and Jeremy Potter can remind us of that, there were significant changes at that point. And the other thing is to draw attention to, in Malden, if we don't have a plan to meet the requirements, the developers have a free hand, and you can see what's happened outside Heybridge, where the developers had a free hand for not having a plan to deliver adequate housing as required by central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Soshin. Councillor Sherlock.
I just wanted some reassurance about the employment sites. Just wondering if the model that's being used is fully up to date, because obviously you've got home working, you've got people maybe going into London a couple of days a week. So and the 3 examples that were put on the screen were widely different. So maybe you could just explain that a little bit more. That would be great.
So employment is slightly different from housing in the sense that if you build a house, then people tend to, occupy it and rent or buy that house. Employment is slightly different. It's a bit more footloose in the sense that employers can, locate where they feel is the best place to locate. It is inherently difficult to undertake accurate modelling in terms of employment, but those 3 scenarios effectively look at fundamentally different approaches, and that's why you've got a fundamentally different outcome to them. The approach that we're taking, and we think is the best way of doing that, tries to solve some of the issues that we've heard tonight, in the sense that if you can provide high-quality jobs close to where people live, and they have high-quality housing as well, then you're going to reduce that propensity to travel to create the issues that we've seen, we've heard tonight. Where you have positions where you don't have enough employment. You have dormitory towns where everyone has to travel to get a good job. And that's precisely what we want to try and avoid, and hence why we're taking the option that actually includes the highest amount of employment land. And I just want to make sure that, we've heard some words about industrial land. This is employment land, this is offices, this is research, this isn't just all about industry, because that's a bit of an emotive word to use in terms of the use of employment across the proposal. So that sets out effectively that summarises. The employment land review is in the evidence bases and has been published on our website if you want to delve a little bit more into the detail of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Councillor Pooley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I'll have a go. First of all, Councillor Jeep's point, and then the points to the gallery about how this isn't ready and how we've not had time and all the rest of it. A couple of things in that relation to that. For me, the saving grace is that this is going out for consultation to seek further views. And as Councillor Social has quite rightly said, the evidence of the past has been that that can change quite fundamentally some aspects in the preferred options document. Now, my experience of Mr. Potter in this week, in this relatively short week, when we had the opportunity to look at the papers, as Councillor Jeeps has said, is that they are more than open to answer specific questions in detail, and I'm not going to ask all the specific questions that I have up my sleeve, you'll be relieved to hear, because it would take far too long. But this consultation process is an absolute must, and I think it is unfortunate that that Councillor Jeeps is not alone in feeling that the preparation so far has had too little member involvement and too little member feedback. I share that view. But I don't think it's at all something that the officers should feel responsible for, nor should they be criticised for that, and nor should they be defensive about it. They've produced a highly professional document with some input from some members, but not really the full awareness of a wider audience. And we can take it forward from there, in my opinion, and not reject it for consultation at this point. I have one amendment that I'd like to put in the recommendation about consultation. It says legalistically, in accordance with the requirements of the Town Planning Act, blah, 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 blah. I think it should say, as was outlined by the officers, in accordance with and over and beyond the requirements of the Town and Country Planning. I think we want to point to the fact that we place a lot of importance on this next phase of things. Second question, I'm surprised that somewhat surprised that we don't have within this very much discussion about the possibility of a dedicated old person's village, which has been knocking about in the background for some time as to whether we did or didn't need some form of specialised development, because now that as time goes by, we get to understand better and better what the preferences of older people are, whether they're in a position to buy something themselves or whether they are reliant on the council to nominate them to a social housing of some description. And what we've got at the moment does not meet those needs across the board. We don't have the opportunity to show people in housing associations the desirability on their terms of downsizing and so freeing up larger houses. We know that people want bungalows. We know that it's difficult because land is expensive and bungalows are taking up a lot of land space. But I think it does suggest that there's a need for discussion of that whole. And I personally thought we might have an opportunity to vote for a specialised old people's development this time around, but we'll see. Final point from me, back on the highways consideration, and trying to take some of the emotive language away from Councillor O'Brien. It is the case at the moment that we are facing over-congestion of an awful lot of our highways. And I speak as the ward member for central Chelmsford here, so I live in it and I notice it all the time. And I do wonder whether the town centre area has the capacity to accommodate the additional development which is being thought of there without something much more radical by way of a highways strategy. Now, there are lots of good words in this policy document about active travel and about how we're encouraging this, that and the other, and we're going to need contributions to it and all the rest of it from any development that takes place. But I don't think that that's side by side by a clear relationship between what our officers and we are proposing as the local plan and what the Highways Department and County Council is proposing by way of managing the traffic which exists at the moment, never mind the traffic which will involve. So I'd like to see a coming together of the highways elements of this plan with what the County Council thinks. An explicit approval by the County Council of what we are saying as a minimum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pooley. I've had a quick sidebar and we're happy to adjust the recommendation, as you mentioned. I just wanted to check down that you got the wording of that. Yeah, okay. I knew you would. Councillor Jeeps.
Yeah, none of my comments were critical of the very comprehensive and professional document that was produced. What does concern me is that there does seem to be only one game in town. The size of this suggests that any alternative, so if the consultation, for example, resulted in this not being satisfactory or acceptable, where do we go? So it tends to lead you to say that any consultation is about playing with what you've got rather than reviewing where it goes. And that is a concern to me.
Thank you, Councillor Jeeps. I think it's probably helpful for me to refer that to Jeremy on how much can be adapted.
So I think, as a number of members have said, Councillor Pooley and Councillor Sosin, there has been changes in our local plans through the preparation. It would be quite odd if there wasn't, because for us to get it right at the first attempt would be, a very a good job. So there will inevitably be changes at the next stage of consultation, and that is the purpose of this preferred options consultation. What we get criticised for is where we don't put detail in, we get criticised because there's not enough detail for people to comment on. And then if we do put detail in, then people say it's too detailed too quickly. So I'm afraid there is always that slight anomaly that we have to face. We feel that we've got the right approach here, where we have a plan that provides for our future growth. And I suppose the other thing that probably has been lost a little bit in discussion is that this is a review of an existing adopted plan. The majority of the plan is unaffected. The main strategy of this document is unaffected. It's the same as has been independently examined and adopted by this council. Of course, there are changes that are being proposed. Some of them, I think, will be welcomed by all in this room. In particular, those that relate to biodiversity net gain, climate change, active travel, all the things that I believe many people subscribe to. I think the issue really is for us to ensure that through the consultation process, we provide the information to our residents in a clear and concise way that is understandable. And taking Councillor O'Brien's point, of course we will be providing newsletters, summaries, much more digestible information for our residents to really assess and to them to provide us with their input. Of course, we wouldn't not do that. It's just that we do need to have the detail to ensure that we do keep developers to account, and the development proposals that we set out are those that we want, and those are those that actually get delivered on the ground.
Councillor Thorpe-Apps.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to start by saying I agree with the earlier comments from Councillors Jeep and O'Brien about the length of the papers and not really having sufficient time to digest the contents. I said that as someone who works full-time, it was quite a challenge to get through them. I'd ask, therefore, if it's something that in future we could look at with officers where we do have a particularly large document, if we could have more than the five working days. That being said, I'd like to thank officers for getting the documents together and also for the initial consultation in 2022, which, as I remember it, was very well publicised and I know exceeded the required statutory consultation period in recognition of the late Queen's passing and the summer holiday period that we had as well. I'm sure the consultation took up a lot of resource, so again I'd like to thank council staff for their efforts. I was, however, looking at the documents tonight, surprised that only 89% of the respondents provided views via the online portal, compared to 448, it says, via letter. I would have thought the majority would have actually responded online. So might this suggest perhaps that the portal isn't as accessible as it could be? And is there anything that we could do to make responding online easier, given that we have another consultation imminently? Turning to the documents itself, I note that Strategic Priority 3 doesn't mention protecting good quality agricultural land. Some of the public comments reference this, and I'd like to see specific mention of agricultural land in the strategic priorities, given the future challenges we all know we face around food security. It does say in the papers, and I know Jeremy Potter referenced this in his comments, that the preferred options local plan does seek to minimise the loss of the best and most versatile agricultural land, which is balanced against sustainability and general suitability of a location for development. So, given that, should agriculture itself not be specifically mentioned in the strategic priorities? The document notes that the preferred options local plan would lead to a loss of approximately 853 hectares of grade 3 agricultural land and approximately 246 hectares of grade 2 agricultural land. The document rightly references climate change as a priority issue, which of course I agree with, but food security will become a more pressing issue. I'm reminded that this council also now has a food plan, which talks about promoting sustainable local food production. Does the proposed substantial loss of agricultural lands therefore not fly in the face of this council's food plan? And secondly, either at strategic priority 3 or 4, I'm not sure which, but I would have thought there should be specific mention of protecting historic village communities from urban sprawl, with priority given to protecting green wedges between urban Chelmsford and the satellite villages. I note that under the preferred options local plan, the green wedges will be maintained, which is very good news. And given this, would it not strengthen the wording to make maintaining the green wedges part of the strategic priorities? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your questions. So just looking at the issue in relation to the type of consultation response, I think the issue we have is that we do open our respondents open to anyone who wants to email, who wants to write, who wants to use their consultation portal. We are aware of some councils that actually say you have to use a prescribed method. I mean, one of the reasons why that is very high is that, you know, the response in relation to Hammond's Farm last time was the use of a pre-printed letter that was distributed, a physical letter, and therefore that's one of the reasons why that is a significantly high number of paper copies rather than the online responses. In relation to the strategic priorities points, I mean, the agricultural land is picked up in actually the policies, and in strategic policy S4, it seeks to minimise the best and most versatile agricultural lands, grade 1, 2 and 3A. And also within the spatial strategy policy, that's S7, It refers to the fact that agricultural land, we're trying to minimise the loss of the best and most versatile agricultural land. And the references in relation to the loss refer to all of the allocations. As far as I'm aware, grade 2 land, Hammond's Farm, as we said before, is predominantly grade 3 and 4. So the grade 2 reference would be on the existing allocated sites. Probably Warren Farm is probably one of those. In terms of the issue in relation to settlement hierarchy or settlement the position of settlements and coalescence and sprawl, our policy S1, the spatial principles, sets out that as one of the guiding principles in relation to the spatial strategy. So at this point in time, I would think that some of the specific tools, as Councillor Thorpe perhaps refers to, are better placed in policies that deal with planning applications rather than the higher strategic priorities that are slightly more objective-based rather than policy-based.
Thank you, Jeremy. Councillor Young.
Thank you. I just wanted to make an observation, really. I will be supporting this going out to consultation because one of the prime reasons is we've got a housing crisis at the moment, and we need to make sure we've got that through flow of new housing coming along in order to secure houses for our future, for our children's futures, our grandchildren's and our great-grandchildren's futures. Yes, it's always very difficult when we start looking at development because we're all uncertain about it. But I trust the officers that we've got in this council. They're some of the best in the country for this type of work. And I really want to thank them for the work and the balance they're doing to juggle all the priorities that necessarily as a council we have. And doing our best also through the work we do to influence national government as well. So I really want to ask everyone, please support this to go out to consultation so we can hear from our residents, all our residents, both within inner Chelmsford and outer Chelmsford, so we understand what their needs are and what they're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Sampson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how there's been a lot of coverage nationally about how hard economic growth is at the moment and how easy it is to say no. You know, we've heard about we don't want building on good agricultural land, in community spaces, in busy city centres, or also in large developments outside the city centre. And it's not to say that some of the comments that we've heard tonight can't improve some of those little things because of their local knowledge and because ultimately we are all trying to make sure that this plan is the best it can be. But I think that overall, you know, with the fact that we are lucky enough to be expecting growth in this area of the county and this area of the country, overall I think there are a lot of good areas where we say, yes, we can develop here. And for that, I think I would want to be supportive of this going out to consultation just for those final little tweaks to, you know, things that we might not have picked up already. But yeah, just to kind of recognise how it is emotive when it's in your village or your town or your street. But we absolutely can't say no to all development, and nor would we want to, because that would be the kind of death of our town centre and our community as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Yes, Councillor Soshan.
I think probably this time it's appropriate for me to...
Chair. Sorry, you missed me earlier.
I'm so sorry, Councillor Robinson. Oh, there's loads more. Right, okay. A quick show of hands. Councillor Robinson. Got it, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Soshan. Councillor Robinson, please do go ahead.
I think I should let members of the board speak first.
Councillor Walsh.
Right, thank you. So I'd just like to thank again the officers for the work that has gone into the local plan. And I think it's important that it does go out to consultation so we do get the feedback from residents around specific areas. But as being a councillor in an area that's not, and I did see the the notes on how this would go out for consultation. I just wondered, for areas that are not parished, so I'm in a ward that's not a parish, is there anything different that you would do with the consultation, the advertisement of the consultation in those areas to get the message out and get response from residents in those areas? Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I mean, we're always trying to look at new ways in which we can engage the non-parished areas. We will be using our social media channels extensively, and also any sites will, there will be site notices posted, and there'll be a whole series of exhibitions that are available, and actually we'll probably be doing them in this building, which is going to be relatively central for people in the unparished areas. There'll also be, if we are aware of any newsletters that are produced by neighbourhood groups, not parish councils, then we can provide text for those. We provide text for parish newsletters. So if members are aware of residents groups that have those types of newsletters, please let us know, and then we can use that to engage with some of those areas that aren't parished.
Sorry, just quickly add, we'll also be circulating things like posters, so to GP surgeries, community buildings as well, asking them to display, to advertise and promote the consultation. Then we have some pop-ups and some mobile leaflet dispensers as well, so we'll be looking to put those in locations that are accessible within the city centre, so places like the Melbourne Sports Stadium as well, to engage specific residents outside of parished areas.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. Can I go back to the point about the 5 days? The simple answer is in documents like this is to send a draft copy to councillors in advance so that they are able to deal with 1,500 pages of document. We have done that for various things and could have been done here. It is a struggle to read, clearly that's the case really, but if a draft comes to councillors, they've got a chance to come to this meeting, as has been mentioned by my colleagues here, fully briefed. I'm not querying any of the substance of what we're trying to do, really. I'm simply saying that it takes a lot of reading to do it, and it has been a struggle. Now, I've been involved with the odd local plan over the years, really, and realised the sequence of events, and the one that we're pursuing now is identical to the ones we've done in the past, really, for which we've been congratulated by the planning inspectorate for doing more than our fair share, which is what we're doing, really. So that, as others have said, yes, clearly we need to thank the officers and all the people involved, the members, of course, as well, really, because we need to consult the public. The public feel always that we're not consulting them, and the points you were making about non-parished areas is one, but it's just as difficult in parished areas, as we all know. If they're not building houses in Ramsden Heath, my residents don't really care, really. Whereas if they're not building in South Woodham, then everybody over there goes mad. And that's the problem with all consultations on planning, isn't it? That we target them all over the city, but in fact it's those people who live nearby who are most effective. And that's not a surprise, really. But again, our consultations in the past have produced lots and lots of responses. And it's essential that we consult the public so that people behind us and everybody else can make their points of view known on the document that's in front of us. It is a document that, as you say, is mostly the one we've had before. And despite what they said, some of them seem to have read it much more thoroughly than I have over there, so that I congratulate those who've actually gone through it. But again, they've gone through the parts that affect their areas, because that's the natural characteristic that we all have with all sorts of planning, really. So, yes, of course, it should go out for consultation. If I was sitting over there, I would say the same thing in reverse to people is, yeah, that's the chance of the public to come back to us. And that's what we want. We want our public to have their views and to say why you shouldn't do something, because that often is the case with planning. Rarely people come back and say, what a wonderful idea that you're putting new planning near me. Oh, I'm really pleased about this. Of course not. And so we have to go out in such a way as to be neutral, which I think we are. And we have changed plans in the past. Yes, as I say, I've been involved with doing all of those sorts of things, really. And that's, again, very often as a result of public consultation. It's not because our ideas are better as a council or officers. The public come back and say, we should do something better. And we've adopted those policies. So we mustn't be afraid of consultation. There's never a perfect consultation document. It always has things in it that certain people don't want. But again, I think from our point of view, having read, well, a lot of it, or been involved in writing some of it in the past as well, really, therefore, what we're doing now is not significantly changing the local plan. I hope we're improving it. I'm not suggesting any site should be in it or otherwise. That's not what we're here for at this moment. What I think we need to do is to get the public feedback. There is a period, of course, because of the elections and so on, so the documents are not going out until May, so we have more chances, and members can come back to officers and say, what about X and Y? I think, you know, newer councillors perhaps don't appreciate the fact that they can knock on Jeremy's door and say, why have we got this in? It doesn't matter where we are with all the other parts of it all. We are able and should speak to all the officers involved with this, really. So to conclude, if we can send out documents in advance that need to be sent out in advance, I would urge you to do so. If we go out to consultation, then I think we should go out for consultation, and we will have an interesting meeting when the results of that consultation come back, which will be a longer meeting, perhaps, than this one. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Robinson, would you like to come in?
Thank you very much. As the leader of the council, I wanted to come along and listen to what everybody got to say, both the members of the board and members of the public, because this is a very important document and it puts into statutory form, when it eventually finishes, many of the objectives of the administration. I have a lot of sympathy with concerns that an awful lot was sent out and you haven't had much time between it being sent out and the meeting. However, as Councillor Whitehead alluded to in his penultimate comment, we're under a rather difficult, tricky timetable because we can't discuss anything controversial over the next 6 weeks during the Police and Crime Commissioner election period. And, but equally, we have to finish this review process within the next 13 months. We have to finish it by end of May, early June 2025. That's a legal deadline. Otherwise, we kind of like the bells striking midnight, the whole thing evaporates and we'd have to start again under a new legal framework. So yeah, I do have some sympathy, but as Mr. Potter said a bit earlier, the vast majority of this plan is what was agreed by the previous administration in June 2018. By discussing it tonight, but not starting the formal consultation for another 8 weeks, actually both the public and members of this council have more time to engage. So as has been suggested, I would encourage any individual member who's got particular concerns to go and talk to Mr. Potter and his team over the next few weeks and hopefully alleviate or, if not remove, their concerns. So yes, there is an awful lot there, but most of it is from the current plan. What we've done with the changes, some of the changes that we're proposing, essentially were set out in the presentation tonight. So Claire Stuckey's part of the presentation was saying what has changed, which, as you saw, isn't actually a vast amount from what's in the current plan. And there was a particular slide, so I would draw your attention to that slide which says what are the strategic policies that have changed. I think there were six of them, and one DM policy. And the things that we are particularly emphasising are things that we felt weren't given sufficient emphasis in the current plan, but needed changing, namely greater emphasis on climate action, greater emphasis on affordable housing, and greater emphasis on creating jobs, because that's how we create sustainable communities. There's been some discussion about the housing numbers, and we've had to allocate some additional sites to take it forward for the next 5 years, but they were what was submitted in the previous round of consultation. When the council asked for submission of the sites to be nominated, there were more than twice as many sites for housing identified than we needed. And so there has been an evaluation process that was done when you discussed this at issues and options stage, and that was when a shortlist was drawn up, and you discussed that last time, and as has been mentioned, we went out to consultation, and this is responding to the consultation. This, as again, I agree with Councillor Whitehead, this council has a history of actually having one extra round of consultation than we're legally required to do. So there was the previous one, there's this one, there'll be another one at the end of the year, and then there's the final deposit version of the plan. So there are more opportunities for the public to engage. So I heard I heard all of what Councillor O'Brien said, but much of it he was criticising things that are already in the plan. So, for instance, references to the train station, that was in the plan already. So if he's got concerns about that, by all means raise them, but they are a criticism of the existing plan, not the changes that are proposed here. And just finally, on the issue about specific site allocation and why we've favoured this particular site. I and my group, last time round, when this plan was being discussed, and indeed in the previous plan, opposed the concept of medium-sized site allocations. Because if you allocate 200 or 300 houses in one place, that you have a significant impact on the community, but not enough to get investment in infrastructure, which is why I opposed the 4 lots of 200 that are on the edge of my ward and the edge of Broomfield. I thought that was a strategic error. I said so at the time. But we need the houses. So actually, from a sustainability point of view, it makes much more sense to have a large site than lots of small sites. There is a small number of micro sites, the 20, because we have to do that. The government requires us to allocate a few tiny sites to support small developers. But broadly, it is much better from an environmental perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, to have large sites, because then you get the big infrastructure. Because if you put 200 somewhere, that's not enough to get you a new primary school. To get you a new primary school, you need a minimum of 1,000. And so that's why in this allocation at Hammond's Farm, of 3,000 initially and another 1,500 in the long term, we get 3 primary schools, well, an all-through secondary school and effectively 3 primary schools, which you wouldn't get if you were having 300 there, 500 there, and so on. And that's why it's better to go for the larger site. If you want to, and I'll say this to residents in the gallery, if you think that that site is not environmentally sustainable, or whatever your reasons for objecting are, then A, make that, but please also suggest where else they should go. Because when I campaigned against... Well, we've...
Can I, as I've already said before, please can we let the members and the officers speak? Thank you.
One of the allocation sites is adjacent to my ward, and I've spent a lot of time in the last 4 years making sure, although I opposed it, I campaigned against it, it's there, I have to accept it, and I've been trying to make sure that it's the best. What I was about to say before I was heckled was, if you want to propose an alternative site, please do. You cannot just oppose, you must propose an alternative, because otherwise we will fail to meet our housing need. And as Councillor Young said, this country has a housing crisis. We have hundreds of families in temporary accommodation. We have thousands more people on the housing waiting list and thousands more people in unsatisfactory accommodation. So not building houses is not an option. We have to allocate 1,000 a year. That's the need that the government says we need to, and we agree with that. And Mr. Potter has explained that even though we have allocated an awful lot of housing, it hasn't been built. We have not built enough houses in this district over the last 20 years, as Mr. Potter explained. We are nearly 1,900 short of what we should have built. So, by all means, oppose the site, but you must, if you are to be credible, propose an alternative. And there were lots of alternatives in the previous round. We have evaluated them and come to the conclusion that this is the least worst, if you want to put it that way, the least worst option of all the ones that were submitted. And that has been talked about. So by all means make representations, but you cannot, if you want to be credible, just say no. You must have an alternative. And that's what we've done. We've gone through all the options and proposed this one, because there's an awful lot of benefits, as Mr. Potter has explained, as to why we think that's the way to go. So, to sum up, this is an amendment to the existing plan. It focuses on climate action, creating jobs, and stronger communities. And now is the opportunity for the next round of consultation, and everybody can make their comments, which we will look at. This board will meet again later in the year to look at those comments and make any revisions. As has been mentioned, revisions have been made at each stage and in the past. So I look forward to the well-argued comments that the public make over the May-June period of consultation. And I hope the board will support this plan to go out.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Scott, of course you can.
Chair, Board, Councillor Robinson, I respect what you've said, but I'm going to have to say this. You mentioned something in climate action. Where are we going to get the doctors and the surgeries from? Not the surgeries, the doctors. We, in Danbury and Little Baddow, have not got enough doctors. There are many of us that have to go outside to Bicknaker and Southwood and Ferris. I know when myself and Councillor Irvine came along to a meeting, Jeremy Potter, who I highly respect, did say, that is my biggest problem. He said to public, that is my biggest problem, getting the doctors. Where are we going to get the doctors? Because people can come and live here, but people get ill and they bring children that are ill, and we cannot get the doctors, and that is my concern. So, and also, one other thing that I know from Danbury is that we have so much pollution. How much more pollution can we take? Because I feel, like Councillor O'Brien, very passionate about this situation, the health of the residents that we, Councillor Armstrong, Jeeps and I have to oversee and make sure that, I mean, they contact us at absolutely everything about St Peter's Hospital that's going, which I know is nothing, you could say nothing to do with us more than...
Can we kind of rule it out of order? It's a government-produced doctors. Whether somebody lives in place A or place B, you can have the same doctor. But I think it's time that I should draw the...
Councillor Social, I do take your point. It isn't directly related, but it sounded like Councillor Scott was winding up you're reaching the end of your point.
Thank you for listening to me. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. If it's a very brief one, please. Thank you.
It is very brief. It was related to my original question. With the agricultural assessment, we're assessing it in industrial farming methods rather than actually you need a class 4 piece of land to grow vineyards. You need poor soil, you need bad gradients that would be classed as a 4. So that's why I just wondered whether that amendment could be put in that assesses actually some of our wonderful, unique things that we've got in Chelmsford, world-renowned. So it was just on that actually we've got incredible agriculture here that wants bad soil and produces jobs because it's got the follow-on production part of it. So the cricket bats require processing in a process in Danbury. They're used by world-renowned cricketers across the globe. And our wine is, I can't even get a hold of a bottle because the king keeps to seem to bite up the whole time. So it's just on that economic value.
Chair,
Councillor Scott, I believe you made that point earlier on today and Jeremy has addressed that. Please do put it in the consultation. There isn't the scope within the time frame to make amendments as it is, but absolutely the recommendation, which I hope we'll be able to take forward, is to give yourself, the residents, the opportunity to make exactly these points and for them to be taken on board. So If I can pass over to Councillor Soshin, please.
Yes, what I was going to say really was that all these points made, such as by Councillor Scott and the people here, they're also in the audience, they should submit these again as part of the consultation to be taken forward, unless they found that the answers they got tonight fully answered their point. But if the answer isn't satisfactory to them and there is more detail that they may expand their argument against what they've heard, please bring it forward to the consultation. As I'm afraid, yeah, it's a pity you had a week now, and there was a solution that Councillor Whitehead said to that, to take now, but you've got from now until the end of the June to study this document and to bring forward points either directly to the officers there or to make them as part of the consultation. And I'm going to go forward now and make the recommendations that we go forward to this consultation. So the first recommendation, the board approves the publication of the Chelmsford Local Plan Preferred Options Consultation Documents and the Preferred Options Integrated Impact Assessment attached to Appendices 2 and 3 of this report for public consultation in accordance with the requirements of this Town and Country Planning Act. The board notes the contents of the issues and options you said we did feedback report attached to Appendix 1. Give the authority to the Director of Sustainable Communities in consultation with the Cabinet member for growing Chelmsford to make any necessary minor amendments to the plan, etc., and so on, and prepare the necessary documentation to support the planned programme of public consultation, including publishing the 2023-2024 Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment. And I'd hope we'd notify the member of the opposition of any such changes. 4, that the board endorses the proposed approach to the local plan preferred options consultation arrangements as set out in Appendix 4. And I just remember that there was a slight amendment by Councillor Pooley because it's above the, in accordance with and above the requirements of the this said Town and Country Planning Act. So I propose that for this board to make those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Soshin. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Young. For this recommendation, can we please have a clear show of hands if we agree that to all the recommendations that have been put forward? So if we're in agreement. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, I do this every time. And those against? Thank you. And those that abstain, although there wasn't anyone. I felt I should ask. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you very much to officers for being here and for going through this document, and for the public for coming in to discuss with us as well.